and do it.
Midnight and Sunday.
Okay, we'll call a special meeting of the council to order. It's May 12th, 7 p.m. Do we have a motion to commence the meeting? Second. All in favor? Yes, carried. Okay, item number 2 is the adoption of the agenda. Motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, any additions? Oh, okay, all those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed, carried. Okay, Marina, if you'll open it up to public questions, if there's any participants like that. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand. Marina will let you in. Thanks. Tamara, if you'll unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is for Randy Dill. And it's around the accounting process whereby you've swapped out municipal land sales, which I think is really great, for 100% funded grants, which I don't think is actually possible. So my question is there some sort of memorandum of understanding in place through the ministry to provide those grants to make sure that that funding is in place because it's been accounted for and planned for in this budget that you're putting forward to the citizens, the taxpayers of Lions Bay? Thank you.
Hi, Randy. Sorry to put you on the hot seat here. If
No, that's all right. I'm just not quite clear on her question regarding land grants. Maybe she could re-clarify that for me to help me out.
Tamara, could you just clarify that, please?
Yes, so I see that in terms of the CapEx spending that you've actually allocated 100% grant, 100% of grants. The funding is going to come through grants, not through taxes. And I'm just wondering if this is even possible.
Okay, so.
Sorry, I'm in Montreal, so I'll mute myself.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand, and I want to be very clear here. So within the budget is a suggestion or to acquire land through capital?
No, I think the question is the question we've raised before, which is it appears in the budget as though we're getting our funding balanced by 100% grants and an assumption of grants. So that's the question to you.
Randy, let me explain what it is. For years 2023, we know exactly what grants we get.
Right.
In years 24 onwards, there is a wish list of capital expenditures. It's only financed 3 ways: property taxes, debt, or grants.
Right.
A placeholder is being put in for grants. It's
Right.
just as easy to put it to debt. We have been told to put it to grants,
Okay, so.
which makes sense.
Sure. So my answer to that would be, first of all, I know that administration has been talking to the consultant Doug Ray, who's an expert in lots of experience in terms of financial affairs, and so he would have guided you in terms of those issues. But my second comment would be that it's not uncommon within the budget to suggest that we're going to try to finance a particular project both by grants, which we're not sure are going to come through, and through taxation. And it's usually a percentage of both. Often you don't know whether or not you're going to get those grants because the province hasn't announced, or the feds haven't announced what those grants are going to be. Keeping in mind that the budget is a fluid document and it can be amended and changed as you go through the next year. What you're trying to do is match up revenues with prospective capital projects that you're trying to achieve, but you may not be able to achieve them, in which case it's all about reporting back to council on a quarterly basis as to how you're doing. I hope that answers the question.
So then, as a follow-up, are we being set up to have to borrow the money that doesn't come in through grants? We will have to borrow in order to complete those projects or be on the hook for it?
Well, I'm not sure I'd use the word set up. I would use the word that you may have to go back to council to ask for a change in the financial strategy because you can't get the grants. And that's not uncommon in terms of financial budgeting.
Could I clarify, Tamara, I thought I heard you say that your belief was that Randy had made these changes in our budget?
No, she didn't say that.
I thought that that's what I heard her say.
My question was for Randy, because
For me.
historically, our budgets have been balanced budgets and they've been very conservative, fiscally conservative. We haven't spent more than we've had to spend and we've been very prudent. So this is a complete surprise. I'm glad that we're not selling off municipal assets to balance our budget, but
That's what you did last
100%.
year.
I agree. This is why there was so much interest in that election in October. And Ken, as many around the table, ran around preserving municipal lands, calling them the jewels of our village. We're on the same side in that, but it's just 100% planning on 100% grant funding sets you up to borrow what you can get it as a grant, and that's without asking the taxpayer, because I believe we had put it in stop measures on borrowing rates and borrowing limits in the previous council. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I remember. So it doesn't seem prudent to me. I'm just wondering, it just leaves us with a really big gap potentially if we plan these capital expenditures and we don't get the grants, or there are no grants, because grants are very competitive. You don't just write one and get one. In fact, we've been very historically unsuccessful. So this leaves us with a projected, what is it, like a $5 million gap to fill in? How do we do that?
Okay,
And I'm
Mr. Mayor, if I could respond to that to help you out
Yes.
a bit. Tamara, I think you raised a very good point in terms of how do you budget for things that you're not really clear on whether or not you're going to get grants for. And the best thing that you can do, the best case scenario, is to put it into the budget and hope that you're going to get those grants because the province or the federal government have announced that they're going to provide them. At the end of the day, you may not be successful, in which case you have to go back to the council and say, we can't get this done because there are the grants have dried up or we weren't successful. So we either drop the project or we borrow through MFA, which is our Municipal Financial Authority, which is actually the best financial system that we have in place actually in the world. It's an amazing system, but you have to be, every decision about those capital projects must always go back to council. It's not an administrative decision, it's a council decision, and it has to be done in open. So in answer to your question, if it fails in terms of getting the grants, must go back to council. Council must decide whether or not they wish to proceed with those particular projects or send them off into the future, which is not uncommon, and or perhaps rely on reserve funds that have already been set aside. It's not a straightforward process, but if you want to do a project, you must identify it and do your best to get the grants around that. It's just part of the process that you have to go through and hope that you can get it.
Randy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you mentioned the grants, and I mean, I guess it creates the inference that you mentioned the grants, and if they don't come through, in fact, it's much more than that. It's just a line item, or as Ron described it, a placeholder, and it's a figure that's placed in there to, make the books work and balance out.
That's right.
I mean, I referred to them last night as the fantasy grants line item. Would that be completely out of order?
I don't think it's a fantasy. I think it's our best effort to try and balance the books. At the end of the day, as a local government, you are required to not run a deficit. So you do so by either revenue from taxes, revenue from grants, revenue from borrowing. Those are the three avenues that you have available to you. So you as a council are ultimately responsible for not running a deficit.
Right, but just to be clear, sorry, one thing is that these numbers are not based on any actual expectations to grants. They're just figures that are in there to balance the budget.
They're your best estimate as to what's going to happen.
You have to have them in there to go after the grants.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Randy, can
Otherwise, sorry, I just want to complete my thought here. Otherwise, what's the point in putting it in there? You have to apply for the grants, and there's a percentage that usually the grants set. So 40% municipality, 60% province, whatever it is, and you put it in there and you hope to be able to get it. And that's the way it's played, and you do your best to be able to achieve that. And if you can't achieve it, you drop the project and you move it on to the next project.
Okay, Councillor Abbott.
Can I comment? Randy, we haven't done that. The assumption here is we're going to get 100% grants to fund all of our infrastructure wishes. That, as Marcus refers to, that is a fantasy. We
Well,
discussed it, and we know that's not going to happen.
okay,
But that's what the 5-year plan says, and that's what residents like Tamara are mentioning. She's not the first one.
all right. So,
We with a purely to balance the budget. We do not realistically expect to get
All right.
$5 million of 100% grants.
all right. So, and I hear what you're saying, and I don't know the details of your budget, but what you can do is once the critical thing for tonight is to approve your tax bylaw and your financial plan. Once you've done that, you know exactly what your tax revenue stream is going to be. Your budget is something that you can amend in the future, 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road. So once all the dust is settled, you can look at that and go, we're not going to get that, so we better amend the budget. And that's not uncommon. Councils amend budgets all the time. And it's because you're really batting in the dark. You're trying to do the best you can, given what you think is going to come in the door, what you think is what your challenges are. You frankly don't even know what your capital costs are going to be. You're taking an estimate at that too. And so at the end of the day, your capital cost might be much higher by the time you do a tender. So you're trying to balance all of those things together to make sure that you don't exceed your revenue streams. And so you have the ability as a council, that's what you're charged with, to amend the budget in the future. It's not a fantasy, it is reality.
Randy, if I could just jump in, the purpose of why it's put this placeholder in, there's a high priority list of capital expenditures. It hasn't changed in 4 years. We wanted the numbers in there. It gives the village an opportunity to say, how do we attain these? So we know we need $10 million of capital expenditures. How do you finance it? Or do you keep deferring it, which has been going on for, I'm going to say 10 years now, 5 to 10 years. There's $10 million of what they call high priority. So now the plan is, how do you finance it? That's why it's in the budget.
Just to be clear, we haven't deferred everything for 10 years.
So 5 years.
Or 5 years for that matter. What we haven't managed to do, well, we've done some work,
No, but it's been the same numbers that keep getting postponed. These aren't new numbers.
What I'm saying is we have made some progress in this few years. What we haven't been able to do is do it at the rate we need to. So we create this bit of a bow wave, and that's what we need to deal with.
And that's what we're doing. Yeah. That's what this budget does. It says you need $10 million. How do you finance it?
So Randy, you talked about the importance of the strategy session, and I would imagine that this is something that you would help us with, and that we would use to sort of land maybe on a little bit more concrete sort of path forward as we move.
I think it's absolutely critical that you decide as a council what your goals and objectives are going to be through strategic planning, and then you carve that off into a plan. For infrastructure seems to be the big issue for a lot of municipalities, but so are the softer services and recreation and parks, etc. And determine how you're going to fund that over the next 5-year period. Part of your budgeting process is about financing, is about reserve funds, it is about grants, and it is about taxes coming in. All of those things have to come together to make sure that you don't, in fact, we're the only level of government that is not allowed to run a deficit. Every other government can run deficits but us. So all of those things come together to make sure you don't run a deficit. There are tight controls on that, and you're responsible as a council to make sure that you meet those goals. But keeping in mind that we don't know often what the cost of certain infrastructure is going to be, the cost of delivering certain services are going to be, and budgets must adjust in accordance with those that information coming in over time. I hope that answers your question, but it's not that straightforward in terms of it's not a fantasy, it's not a wish list, it's an effort to try and meet your goals and objectives.
Councilor Ryder?
Yeah, so Randy, are you suggesting that we perhaps do the strategic planning workshop with your assistance and then revisit the budget perhaps after we've done that?
Most certainly, that would be a very solid outcome from that, and I would strongly recommend it because I know that some of you are frustrated with the process. You have some issues around understanding what it says and what it doesn't say and how it works. But I would think that the strategic planning process will help you get through that as well as many other issues in moving forward, and it should be done sooner rather than later.
Councilor Abbott?
So while we were talking, Randy, when you first started talking, actually, I started scribbling something down. Put this out there that maybe we can agree to this and do this resolution prior to adopting the budgets. And what I wrote down was the council commit to complete a strategic planning session in June and update the budget before the summer recess. Can we as a council agree to do that? If I put that forward as a resolution?
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused over what you said. You said, let's have a strategic planning process in June, which is fine.
Yeah.
And from that, let's agree to reviewing the budget process subsequent to that. And I said, so
Yes,
my view, that would be one of the outcomes.
So what I wrote, and update the budget before the summer recess. I want to put a deadline on this so we get.
Look, absolutely. That's part of the strategic planning is to identify the major goals you want to try to achieve, and one of them is to verify the things you want to achieve in your 4-year mandate, but also in your short-term mandate. So yeah, absolutely, Councilor Abbott. That's part of strategic planning, and frankly, you need to get this done now. One of the requirements of the ministry, the provincial government, is to send in by the end of June your goals and objectives along with your financial plan. And so that would tie in very nicely by mid-June to have your strategic planning process done and tie it in with the requirements of the financial plan in terms of what are your goals and objectives. So it all ties together. And it's all about good governance and good planning and making sure that we're all in the same, going in the same direction. Not to say you all have to agree, you may not, but let's get on with the proper governance of the village.
Sorry, just to clarify, we need to send this in by the end of June?
Yes, your goals and objectives should be sent in by the end of June. I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's by the end of June. And it ties into your financial. So right now you're approving your tax bylaw, your financial plan bylaw, and then that goes in, but you also must by the end of June send in your goals and objectives, which is tied to your strategic plan, to them by the end of June. So there's a lot of stuff you have to go through. There's lots of discussion that needs to take place. It's not that straightforward. It's not rocket science. It just needs to be done.
Is that a hard deadline, like the budget and the
You know
tax
what,
bylaw?
Marcus, you've asked that question of me many times. Yes, it is a hard deadline. You must get this done.
No. The end of June deadline.
Yes, it is. We need to move on and meet the deadline that every other municipality meets, except you guys.
So do you want to put that forward as a motion?
Yeah, I'll put that forward as a resolution. If I can get a second.
I'll second that.
Are you suggesting we pass a resolution on that, Randy?
Well, what I'm trying to get you guys to do is two things. Number one is three things. Number one is get this tax bylaw and the financial plan bylaw approved today, so that we're good to go on that. We're solid. The second thing is to approve a timeline that we can get together and talk about governance and what are the best practices of British Columbia and in Canada, frankly, in terms of how we manage the corporation. This is a corporation. It happens to be a public one, but there are certain parameters in terms of how we manage that that are very critical to how we move forward in an effective and efficient manner. That's number two. Number three is to do a strategic plan, which is different than governance, a strategic plan that sets out our goals and objectives as cooperatively and collaboratively as possible. And it's not easy, it's tough work, that sets it out for the next 4 years or 3.5 years now of your mandate. So there's a number of things that need to be done here. I will be on your Zoom on Tuesday night to ask you for very specific dates because we need to move forward on this. We need to plan it. We need to get this thing done. And it's not easy stuff to do these workshops and get these things done.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table. Neville, what was, read it out again, that we agree.
The council commit to complete a strategic planning session in June and update the budget before the summer recess.
Can we make that the first half of June? Try to get as early as possible?
Sure.
Well, thinking you have to be realistic. Are you all comfortable of what capital spending is? This is all about capital spending. Are you comfortable what's needed? So you won't have time for your infrastructure committee to meet. You won't have time to create one. Are you comfortable that what says is important? You understand every project. You've met with Nye or Carl to say, you need this and when you need it. We're talking 12 or $15 million here. So will you know that within 2 weeks?
Right, right.
So we had a plan for that last year.
You did talk about it in September. You had your planning meeting in September.
We had a planning meeting every year.
Yeah, so you had your most recent one would have been September 2022. So nothing here is new to you.
No. So what we've got a document.
No, I know it's nothing's new here to you.
I know.
With the other guys.
And so what I'm saying is we have a document the previous council had that had been evolved over 6 years, actually, because it started 2 years before.
That's what I said, it's the same numbers.
And so we need to go update that. There's a few things we can scratch off the list, not as much as we hoped, clearly. And once we've got that document, we can sit down and discuss it. I don't.
Well, you have the document. It's in the budget. That's where these numbers come from. It comes from Nye's spreadsheet. But it's $15 million of projects. Are you going to be comfortable in 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
We know we're not going to have $15 million in 2 years. That's one of the things.
No, but that's the idea of this strategic planning.
Exactly.
Councillor Broughton.
Okay. It seems to me that the strategic planning is going to determine what it is that we want to create in terms of outcome. And so I think we're having this, I think we're all committing to a strategic planning meeting. And I think to put deadlines and dates on what we do in that strategic planning meeting is not helpful. So I just think, we need to move ahead. So I don't support the motion because why are we legislating that we're going to update a budget when we don't know whether we'll have the information to do that? We're doing
Perhaps we get
doing a resolution.
Yeah.
And we're committing to going and to working in the process, which may generate the discussion that we want to have. We want to alter the budget. If that's the case, then that's what we would do.
Now, well, maybe the motion needs to be more on committing to the strategic meeting, the governance, and get this underway. Like Ron says, are we going to be able to land on a new plan or something different within 2 weeks? We may, but most likely we're going to want to have the input of the grants committee and the infrastructure committee. And we're going to want to have the committee of the whole fulsome discussion. So
as has been discussed many times and mentioned by many people, we can update our budget as often as we see fit.
Right. But
we update the budget often as I see fit. What I'm trying to do is put some sort of milestone on, re-looking at it after strategic planning session in full order, so that it doesn't just drag on and we end up doing it as part of next year's budget. And if we don't, and I think if we don't give ourselves that kind of goal, it's just going to drag on.
can we put get a land on a strategic meeting and that process? I think that would be the first step, and then we move on to revising the budget if that becomes apparent after proper debate and input from, again, infrastructure, grants committee.
So summer recess begins what, August 1?
Yeah.
So that would give us through July.
With June, July, if we do the strategic planning session in the first couple of weeks in July, we've got 6 weeks to do it.
Yeah, not two.
July, you said June, but July makes more sense.
Well, Randy mentioned a
June,
June.
the first week.
That's the goals and objectives. You got your goal, you got meetings, have your goals and objectives. That's a good thing. One of your goals is to have the planning session, your capital expenditures.
Yeah, so the first planning session, which Randy was going to facilitate for us, I think, was to have that in June. And then once we come out of that, and probably several sessions after that, and discussion about, certain capex or water, more detailed look at water, whatever it is. But then by summer recess, which is end of or 1st of August, we go back and we have a redo the budget. That's what
Is
it
it one of your first round, Kevin? Sure. But it's not just about capital expenditures. You're gonna, for example, you're gonna say you need $5 million next year. Just for an example, because that is in the budget, I believe.
Yeah.
How do you finance it?
Yeah, so that's why I think we need to be more realistic about how we're going to finance it. And I think we give ourselves a goal.
It's fine.
And I think we should be looking at anything that comes up in that discussion. It's not just capex.
So the strategic planning meeting as early as possible.
Sure.
And it's gonna give us some time.
Yeah.
And
And that early in June.
So you're probably right, we give ourselves as much leeway as we can, because we're gonna want input from the infrastructure, again, infrastructure grants, and we're gonna want to think about it, debate it, and so I'm on board on moving this forward. It's just, that's good that we're getting some feedback from Mr. Miller.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we're committing to the strategic meeting as early as possible, Randy. And then, of course, there's a high likelihood that we want to have that, the budget discussions early June, and it might go through, but we want to try to land on something if we're going to make some adjustments.
Sure, and I will throw some dates out. I intend to connect with you on your Tuesday meeting. I will throw some dates out to you so that we can try to finalize these 2 workshops. And to be very blunt and honest with you, these need to happen very quickly. You've had a really rough road. You have a new council member. Basically, you have a new council. We need to get on with good governance, and so we need to make both these workshops that can be very helpful to the community and to council happen as quickly as possible. And I'm totally available through those months. So let's make it happen.
Okay. Are we okay? And we're going to move on some dates as early as possible. Be comfortable with that?
Sure. I mean, can we just adjust my resolution to say strategic planning session early in June and then leave the rest of it as it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So Marina, you got it? So, and then we revisit the budget before the summer recess.
For the same reason.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any hands. We'll move right to item number 4, review and approval of the minutes of the prior meeting. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I've got them with me. I didn't think I spotted anything. There wasn't much to it.
Right.
I've got a copy here if you want. Thank you.
Doing something else this afternoon.
Yes, what's that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, all in favor?
Yep, excuse me, could I say?
Oh,
Yeah.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Opposed, carried. Okay, next item is the 5A bylaws. Do we have a motion that the 2023 to 2027 5-year financial plan bylaw number 629 2023 be adopted? I have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All in favor? Sorry, you have some discussion.
I'm sorry, but I lost you on discussion.
Okay.
I'd like to encourage my colleagues to move forward I urge you to support the adoption of the bylaws. I heard the community, say loud and clear at the two gatherings that we had prior to the by-election that they wish to move forward and wish council to work together to that end. I was profoundly disappointed yesterday when, given our first opportunity to come together to pass the 2023 budget, that we were not able to all vote in favor of that. I felt like we were choosing divisiveness over working together in a matter that was very simple to agree to. Going so far as to identify your abstention as passing the readings and the tax rate as a protest. I recognize that change is difficult for some. However, ask the council move forward without divisiveness and in the best interest of the village of Lions Bay. Councillor-elect Cunliffe has stated that she will work to create harmony in the council chamber and work together for the common good of our community. I'm committed to creating the best outcome for the village of Lions Bay and ask that we all commit to this goal. I ask for full support of the adoption of the 2023 budget. Our community deserves our full support and to move forward. I urge everyone to support adoption of this budget and the tax rate bylaw.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Bowden, anything?
No, that's fine.
Councillor Abbott?
Thanks, Michael, for that. Let me just state that my reason to abstain was made clear last night. It wasn't to continue any divisiveness in the community. The reason I abstained is because residents had asked me and I'd asked myself, did I have confidence in this budget? And I said, no, I did not. And that's the reason I abstained, the sole reason. There's nothing meant to create continued divisiveness or be political in that statement. It's just that I am not confident in that budget. So that's my position last night. So I'm not going to change.
Okay. Councillor Ryder?
Yeah. Michael, you said this is a first opportunity to come together. I mean, I think the first opportunity to come together is when we have a full council. And of course, I'm sure we would have all wished that we could have done this with a full council. But we've been pushed up against a hard deadline. And frankly, the degree to which this has been delayed, I mean, we have had our previous CFO and works manager provide not just the ingredients for this budget. If it's a cake, I mean, they didn't just provide the ingredients, they mixed it together, put it in a bowl, baked it, and asked us just to turn on the oven. And we didn't do that in February or March. We just started doing it in the last couple of weeks. And so that is what causes me to also have very little confidence in this. And I understand that we are under a hard deadline. We need to get our tax rates bylaw done. Otherwise, we have huge problems. And so my abstention is a recognition that we need to do that. But it is my way of saying that I don't have confidence and I haven't had confidence in this process. And that's why I think that we need to revisit this, the budget going forward. So it's simply that.
Mr. Miller, you had your hand up. So, okay, any further comments?
No.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
Yep. Abstaining. Yeah.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, next item is 5B, motion that tax rate bylaw number 630, 2023 be adopted. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
not I, sorry.
Okay, did you have some discussion you wanted to?
No, no discussion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Abstaining?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, motion carried. Hey, Marina, if you can open it up. If there's any questions from the gallery, we'll entertain those before we adjourn. Okay, just like to thank Randy Deal, once again for coming this evening and providing us with your wisdom. So thank you very much and thank the gallery. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
Yes.
yes.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, everyone.